Good morning, everyone, and welcome to FSMA Fridays. My name is Jill Bender with Safety Chain Software. Delighted to see everyone logging in here. We're excited for today's topic, as we will be talking about some of our initial survey results. We did put a survey out there asking the industry how prepared is the industry for FSMA, and we're delighted to share some of those results with you today. But as always, we will be talking about the latest and greatest with FSMA and taking questions as well. Just as a reminder, with every FSMA Fridays, we will be sending out a link to this recording on Monday. If you have questions you'd like to ask the panelists, you can do so via online. We do have some pre-submitted questions as well. For your privacy, we always just display the panelists, but it's amazing. We have quite the crowd with us today. I'm not surprised. And then, as always, if you have trouble hearing the audio, it comes in automatically via your speakers. I would just go ahead and log into the call-in number, and it'll be a much cleaner, nicer experience for you all. For today's session, delighted to have David Acheson with us, as well as Rolando Gonzales. Hello, gentlemen.
Hello,
Good morning.
And I will just go ahead and get started. David, let's talk. We're in February. What's the latest with FSMA?
Well, yeah, thanks, Jill, and good morning, afternoon to everybody wherever you are in the world. Welcome to FSMA Friday. Not a lot to report on latest updates. I think we're all waiting for guidance documents, and I think they're going to be really helpful. I think we said that before, and so far don't have a good sense as to when they'll be coming out. I think the other point that I would make is that the PCQI, the Preventive Control Qualified Individual Train-the-Trainer programs are well underway, and many people are getting trained in that. So we're starting to get that moving down. I think the other training programs that are in the works on produce are delayed just a little bit. I haven't heard when those are going to be coming out, but that's going to be sort of the next round of training for us from FDA. So that's all going to be good. So guidance documents still coming, and training on the way is probably the latest updates on FSMA, Jill.
Okay, great. And I know I was looking for news. I'm like, what is the latest? I was curious to hear what you were going to say. So we're going to go ahead and just dive right in. As we all mentioned last FSMA Fridays, both Acheson Group and Safety Chain Software, we launched a survey for about three to 4 weeks. It was open, and we invited all FSMA Fridays as well as a larger audience to participate in this survey. And the purpose and objective of it really was to sort of define, now that we're in 2016, these rules are in effect, compliance standards have to be met. How prepared is the industry? And really just to get a pulse and a gauge of some compliance strategies and challenges that you all are facing. We're delighted with the outcome, I think, as far as the number of people that responded and so forth. And we'll go ahead and just dive in and start looking at those results and a little bit of insights from both David and Rolando on what we found out with the survey. So as we get started, we did get about 400 respondents. It was a good cross-section, and with that, we broke out the revenue, and this is all based on FSMA and where you fall from a compliance standard. So the majority of our respondents were in that $1 million above in company revenue, as well as from an employee standpoint as well, but on the larger side. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to David, and why don't you share a little bit about our survey demographics. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead here as far as that. We also had a really nice sector as far as the company type goes. A large amount of the respondents were domestic food manufacturers, no surprise there, but then also a good even kill as far as the other sectors as well, from food service and retail to distribution, warehouse, and transportation. The produce also ebbed a little bit forward, just under 15% as far as the demographics go. But again, a good cross-section of the company type and those who are affected by FSMA. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to you, David. Why don't you share a little bit about what we found of which FSMA rules are applying to the companies that were participating?
Yeah, no, thanks, Jill. And there's some interesting data in this survey, I think, and I think our goal this morning is obviously to share it with you all, but also what can we learn from this? And when I looked at the data on this slide, and as you can see, really what we're asking here is, as you look down the different rules, preventive controls for humans, animals, produce, foreign supplier, sanitary transport, third party, and food defense. So the 7 pillars of prevention, basically, as we've always been calling them. And asking the question, do you think the rule applies to you or does not apply to you? Definitively, black and white kind of question, or that you're unsure. And as you can see, like right out of the gate, we've got almost 85% of the respondents said, yeah, we think the preventive control rule applies to us. I mean, we're sure about that. We've got a much smaller number on the animal food side, with 63% definitively saying that they know it doesn't apply. I think most of the respondents, as you saw from the previous slide, were manufacturers and processors, so it's probably not surprising that that the produce rule definitively doesn't apply to 60% of the folk who responded to this. What I thought was interesting to me is the answer to the next question, which is the Foreign Supplier Verification Program. And we've got over half of the respondents saying, yeah, we think this rule applies to us. And my first reaction to that is, I think you may not be right. And I'm saying that based on the fact that we have so many people who have to comply with the preventive control rule, and they know that they do, and they're probably correct on that. And essentially, if you are compliant with the preventive control rule for human foods, and that includes the supply chain control part of that rule, the subpart G, if you're compliant with that, you don't need to pay any attention to the Foreign Supplier Verification Program. The Foreign Supplier Verification Program is focused on importers of food, the concernees, the recipients of food, who are not otherwise regulated through being a registered firm and having to comply with the preventive control rule. So my instincts on that was, I think a lot of people might be under the false belief that they've got to comply with the Foreign Supplier Verification Program, and where in actual fact that they don't. So I think one idea down the road, Jill, and that's maybe the subject for our next FSMA Friday, is let's dissect these two rules again, if there is a bit of confusion out there, and figure out how does that work in terms of supply chain control. We've talked about it before, but it is one of the most complex areas that we found when we're chatting with our clients, is really trying to get your head around those two components. Sanitary transport, not a surprise, 67%. But remember, sanitary transport it's a draft rules, proposed rule at the moment, so we don't have the final. But if you're just shipping dry goods that's time temperature stable, then the rule doesn't apply to you. Accredited third-party certification. And again, I think there may be just a little bit of misunderstanding on that one. I was surprised so many people felt that was going to apply to them. And then I think food defense is dead on. If you're a company that's making that has more than $10 million of business, then food defense will apply to you. But again, we're dealing with a proposed rule there. So I think some interesting stuff out of this. Not some surprises and some, well, I kind of expected that. But so back to you, Joe.
Okay, great. Thanks, David. I was taking notes fast and fiercely because I do agree there's some areas here that I think would be excellent to further dive into in the next subsequent FSMA Friday sessions as a result. Rolando, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to take the next question, or just your thoughts on the, the results relevant to, are companies ready for FSMA?
Yeah, thank you, Jill, and good morning to the audience. So for this question, not surprisingly, most companies indicated that they're somewhat ready, which is pretty much what we expect at this point. And it's likely a reflection of the fact that there is definitely some work to do to get ready for FSMA, including that PCQI, identifying and training that PCQI, as David mentioned, relooking at the hazard analysis and making sure that there is proper preventive controls identified and implemented for any of those hazards that were identified as requiring so. Now, we had a quarter of all respondents indicating that they're ready, and that's great. But then there was also a few indicating that they're not ready at all. And in that case, what we highly recommend at this point is it's acting now, forming a team, designating that PCQI person, conducting a gap analysis, and defining an action plan to be ready by the compliance date. And let's remember that, for larger companies, that is as early as mid-September of this year.
Okay, and I think that that makes sense. And it'll be interesting too as we sort of dive a little bit more into these results. Again, this is sort of initial to really understand that cross section of 6% versus that 68%. You know, ready, somewhat ready versus ready. Dive into our next question. Keep things moving here. I'm going to go back to you, Dave. We talked about specific areas as far as FSMA compliance and sort of the general themes that we've been discussing FSMA Fridays of what's anticipated as far as the top challenges, and that's what these sort of categories delve into. So let's go ahead and hear your thoughts on this question.
Yeah, I think as we look at the data on this slide and looking down there on the side where we've got the different challenges migrating to HARP-C, supplier compliance, back to my earlier point on foreign supplier verification programs, supply chain controls, creating, monitoring, verifying, validating plans. I think that there's not a lot of surprises in this. I think as we look out on the scale of how difficult the HACCP to HARP-C is sort of landing there right in the middle with a scale of 3, which does illustrate to me is people are seeing that as a bit of a challenge. It's not like, oh yeah, this is easy, done, got it all figured out. We've got the majority of respondents sitting right there into, yeah, you know, this isn't quite as easy as we thought. Foreign supplier verification program, likewise, sitting there, and supply chain controls, you know, up at that, heading up to the top end here. Again, all tracking back to where people are struggling is, yeah, we've got programs, we've got a HACCP plan. How do we merge it to HARP-C? We've got our supplier programs. How do we sort of make sure that we're compliant? I think as we look down, record keeping generally, I think folk feel pretty good about, and which again is not a total surprise. People have had to keep records for a long time, and FDA can come and look at your records. Always have been able to with some sort of credible evidence, which is, I think, as you all know, is now shifted to reasonable probability of a serious adverse health event. Environmental control programs, again, sitting there in the middle, and we've touched on these topics before, Jill, in FSMA Fridays, and I think we're on track, and this is sort of telling me, yeah, people have still got questions there, which I totally get. This stuff is not necessarily straightforward and easy. So I think, you know, again, I think from a future FSMA Friday, looking at HACCP to HARP-C again, looking at supply chain control, looking at environmental control programs, what truly do the FDA expect us to do? And I'm hoping we're going to get some guidance documents out on some of these things, which is going to be good. The understanding how your GFSI programs fit in there too, again, kind of sitting in the middle. So generally, if you look at this overall, the bulk of the scores are sitting right in the middle, where folks are saying, yeah, you know, this isn't super difficult, but it's challenging. We're not quite there yet. We're continuing to work on some of these things. So hopefully FSMA Fridays can continue to provide good insights. This is very helpful information. Back to you, Jill.
Okay, great, thank you. And I think that the next sort of few questions that came out of our survey really tie nicely with what you were just talking about. You know, sort of when we talk about the compliance challenges, more specifically then, what are companies' strategies in getting prepared? So I'll ask Rolando to sort of address these questions.
Yes, Jill. So in this case, this next question, we pretty much saw that about half of those companies relying on a gap analysis to help with preparedness of FSMA. They indicated that they've completed it, while kind of the other half are either working on it or still planning on benefiting from that. And let's recall that, you know, a gap analysis has some important benefits here. It's important because while you may have multiple of the elements required by FSMA, there is still likely some homework to do to fully align with the expectations from FDA, to put together that food safety plan, and also, you know, everything else that is described in those final rules, and and pretty much to align with the HARP-C approach. If you can move to the next slide, please. So in this case, we pretty much saw that most respondents are indicating not planning on using or actually using any outside resources, and that's what the question was asking, pretty much whether you're going to be using any outside resources for that gap analysis. That's great. out there, for example, the ones that are available directly from FDA. But there's still about a third of respondents that indicated that they have used or they plan to use some sort of outside help. And that's probably a good idea, just to get a fresh set of expert eyes to look into what that indicated that. Sorry, what was that? Yeah, sorry.
Oh, sorry, you did got bug out a little bit there. You're back audio-wise.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was talking about, you know, there is, again, there's some benefit in getting a fresh set of eyes, expert eyes there to look into what might be missing from your programs. There was also a 10% that said that they were not conducting a gap analysis at all. And in that case, we recommend at least reading through some of the fact sheets or the rule summaries from FDA, just to make sure that nothing major has been overlooked in their current programs. And in that way, they should also hopefully be fine. So back to you, Jill.
Okay, great, thank you. So along with, you know, from a gap analysis, obviously the next question then is when items are defined, you know, how does that correlate to your programs and updating them? So David, do you want to address that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if we look at the breakdown on here, we've got almost half of the respondents currently updating programs, which is exactly what we'd expect. I think if we go back, Jill, to who answered this, the breakdown was that most companies who answered this were over the 1 million mark, which let's assume also that they have to be FSMA compliant, because I know there were respondents who are in different sectors, food service, for example, retail, who don't need to be FSMA compliant in the way that a manufacturer does or a grower does. So, I mean, here we've got people who are currently updating programs. We've got plans to update in 2016 for a third of people, and it might be interesting to see whether those that are focused on 2016 are all the big companies with more than 500 employees who need to be compliant, as Rolando said, by mid-September this year, or whether there's some of the small companies, which is defined as less than 500 employees, are moving forward right now, which is certainly what is the smart thing to do, is get going. Even if you are a small company, don't be waiting. I think the no current plans to update is maybe that's reflective of those who aren't doing the gap analysis, which also is reflective of the few to whom FSMA doesn't apply. So they're sort of saying, well, yeah, I don't need to update my programs because I don't need to be compliant with the rules. And the earlier slide I talked about in terms of which rules apply, we know that some people know that certain rules don't apply to them definitively, so they're not going to be updating those programs. So I think what this illustrates is that, you know, the train's left the station. People are updating their programs, and I think we're back to then sort of saying, well, where are the pain points? What are people struggling with? Which sort of just drives us back to what we were saying earlier around supply chains, around understanding the foreign supply verification program, the environmental monitoring, the testing programs in general, and the migration from your current program HACCP to HARP-C, or understanding how, if you're GFSI compliant, how you can meld that in and build what Rolando and I often say is key, is be ready on that date that you have to be compliant to respond to the FDA walking in your door unannounced saying, show me your food safety plan. And it's a simple little statement, but that to me is the benchmark of success, is when you can answer that question with confidence. It's like, oh, absolutely, inspector, here you go. And you know exactly what you're going to show your inspector when asked that question, show me your food safety plan. Then I think you can check the box and say, we're good. So anyway, back to you, Jill.
Okay, great. And there's actually just one more follow-up around the food safety programs as far as if outside resources have been utilized.
Oh, yeah, okay, great. So this ties a little bit back to what Rolando was talking about in terms of using outside resources. and we've got the majority of people who are not going to do that, which is totally fine. And, you know, it's interesting how one defines outside resources, and, you know, is listening to FSMA Friday an outside resource? I don't know, Jill. I would say it probably is an outside resource. So maybe this is not entirely reflective of what people are doing, but I think what the intent here is it's illustrating that folk think that they can get it sorted out internally, leveraging hopefully things like FSMA Friday, where there's opportunities to ask questions, and we're all kind of exploring this together and learning what works and what doesn't work. Because obviously with whatever the number is of small businesses and larger businesses, basically any business that's over $1 million manufacturing, processing, packing of food that's not exempt, there's tens of thousands of them. You know, it's great that people are understanding how to do this themselves. So it's, but I think keep in mind that there's always resources, there's always outside folk who are very happy to help should the need arise.
Right. Okay, great. Well, and then again, we'll go ahead and follow up the next questions that came in. The next set was going back to, Dave, what you were referring to is, you know, when the FDA does, you know, come knock on your door. So you've updated your programs, plans, you know, what is, you know, where are your record keeping in regards to the requirements being stated by FDA and the audit readiness? So Rolando, why don't you go ahead and take us through these next sort of questions around record keeping and audit readiness?
Absolutely, Jill. So yeah, in this case, we saw that the glaring majority of the respondents indicated that in meeting the FSMA documentation requirements, they're handling a combination of both paper and electronic records. And that's just, I believe, a true reflection of how we've come to evolve in the industry today with the different tools that are available today. Let's recall that electronic records, they're acceptable by FDA as well. They do most comply with 21 CFR 11, though, which that means that the signatures, they must be authenticated, and validated controls must be in place to ensure that those electronic signatures and records can be relied upon in the same manner that paper records would, you know, any pen and ink signatures in the traditional way. That also applies to any handwritten signatures affixed to those electronic records. Now, what we saw in the survey here was that those companies going solely with one or the other, paper records still prevail over the electronic version of those. Next slide, please. And then, so this next question was asking, well, are you able to produce the required records within the 24 hours, which is actually a requirement? We had about a quarter of the participants who are still not sure that they can do that. That, as I said, it's a requirement, and they are allowed to be stored off-site, though, as long as they can be furnished to the FDA within that 24 hours period. The only exception to that being the food safety plan, which needs to be stored on-site at the facility at all times. Now, if you're using electronic records, just remember that they are considered on-site if they can be accessed on-site, and that could help with meeting that 24 hours requirement as well. The next question was about the confidence level from the respondents in terms of the records being accurate, accessible, and actionable. And there was a scale from 1 to 5, with 5 being the highest. So we had about 3/4 of the respondents indicating the higher scores, so a higher level of confidence in the accuracy of those. Let's remember that, you know, records play a key role in demonstrating compliance with FSMA, and in saying that pretty much you did what you said you were going to do, and that your systems and preventive controls are working as they should. So that is, accuracy is a key goal here. About 3/4 of the respondents, again, indicated that records they feel are accessible, but that's one area that we still have some challenges in some of the companies that we work with. So it continues to be a challenge of perhaps technology can assist with that, and we actually have a later question regarding the use of technology. And then finally, we saw a less definitive answer regarding how companies feel about how actionable are these records. So thinking along the lines of continuous improvement, making sure that the data is trended and can be analyzed over time to make better informed decisions. It's definitely something that we recommend companies to pursue beyond the regulatory compliance that we're seeking here. And then next slide, please. In this question was pretty much, how do they feel about being audit ready by day one of FSMA enactment? And so blue was yes here, and about 50% of the respondents indicated that they feel they're going to be ready by day one, but then another 43% indicated that they're unsure. And I think that comes along again with the anxiety of, like David was saying before, you know, gathering all these documentation, all these different moving pieces and parts of what's required to be fully aligned with the FDA expectations. So that's pretty much what we saw in terms of audit readiness and documentation, Jill.
Okay, great. And just moving along then, and David, I'll take us back with you. Then taking it to the next step, you know, what sort of resources or technology are being planned or have already been implemented, if you wanted to talk about that in the next few questions here.
Yeah, this slide is getting at the question of do you think you've got what it takes in terms of resources? And we've got almost half of the respondents saying, yeah, we're good. We got enough people. We got it covered. We've got 13% saying we need to bring on more folk to do this, and then 44% are unsure. So the majority actually are either not sure or they've already got plans to bring people on. And you know, that creates costs to do this. And I'm pretty certain if you look at the economics that the FDA was thinking about when they put FSMA together and put the rules out, they weren't anticipating that companies would need to hire new people to do this. I happen to think that with some of the rules, some of the ways set there, that may not be an accurate assessment. And obviously this slide would indicate that to some extent that's true. But it sort of, this speaks to the fact that folk are still trying to figure out, can we get this done with the resources we have? And if we can't, we got 13% already saying, yep, we got to bring on more people. Ultimately, you know, this will shake out into the green and the blue as everybody drops into one box or another. But this is actually interesting that a lot of people are saying we don't know. We don't know. We're trying to figure that out. So let's go on to the next slide, Jill.
Right. Okay.
Excuse me. So as we look at the technology that's being used to manage FSMA compliance, document management, audit management, suppliers, food safety program management, the LIMS system, GFSI automation systems. We got all over the map on this one. Document management, we've got a spread pretty much across people not considering it, almost a quarter of folk up to a little over a quarter saying, yeah, we got it in place. Likewise, the audit management, it kind of just spreads across. Supplier compliance, interestingly, the majority, although it's pretty much an even spread, we got 29% are considering that. We've got some that have it already in place. So again, a pretty big swath of responses here. Program management, 33% have got it in place. LIMS, not considering it. And that may be that they've already that they've got systems that work just fine, don't need to think about that. And GFSI automations, likewise, most people are not considering it. So if you take LIMS and GFSI out, we've got kind of a spread between folk who are considering it, implementing it, or have it in place around some of these other document management systems. And I think over time we're going to see people using these more just because it is cost effective. And if you can build these programs in and to save you having to hire somebody, which is just becomes an increased cost, then that's an advantage. So let's look at what's next, Jill.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is sort of just wrapping up the last part of this survey, David, and we'll just go ahead and stay with you on this. Just talking about just the general overall impact and, you know, general feelings around FSMA.
Yeah, I think this was to try to get a sense of the corporate executive team's understanding of FSMA's new authorities, impact of FSMA on the company, and obviously we're running I don't quite know what to say about this. We're running from one end of the spectrum to the other. I mean, it really is all over the map. We've got some people who are, I would say, no, they don't have a clue. And then we've got other people who say, yeah, we're in great shape. I think that, if I was to pull out something interesting on this, look at executives' understanding where you're saying, yeah, they're really on board. And looking at the bottom of the chart where we've got 14%, 17% in that top bracket, which isn't that much. And, that's telling me that there's probably a lot of food companies who responded to this who are saying, yeah, the executive teams are not quite there. They're sort of there. They're in the middle. They're in the 3-4 range, 2-3-4 range, which means there's some understanding, but they're not where we want them to be. They're not. So I think if there's a conclusion to come out of this slide, would be that the senior leadership in the companies don't get it yet. That's a bit of a sweeping statement, but I'm saying when you've got full understanding, you get it. And this data would indicate we don't have full understanding yet, but we're at least moved beyond the what's FSMA question, which is good. But I think upper management education is still clearly in need, and that's where the resources are going to come from, should they be needed, and obviously the help and the guidance to make this all happen. So we need to do a little bit more work on educating the bosses.
From this, it seems to be apparent with that. So let's just go ahead and conclude the last part of this. And this, again, was just sort of a gauge of the audience on, took the survey. Just the general thoughts on FSMA, on these three, carriers of three key areas.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a fun question is, given that we're all in this food safety space, FSMA has given some of us headaches, some of us bigger and worse headaches than others. And 50% of people said, yeah, FSMA's good. FSMA's going to have a positive impact. Maybe I shouldn't extrapolate positive impact of FSMA's good, because it's not actually asking the same question. But I think there's recognition that, yeah, despite all the pain, this will have a positive impact on public health with 50% of people. Small number, only 8% said, no, it's just a pain. It's creating financial resource burdens. It's kind of, don't like it. And then I was particularly struck with, again, half the respondents thinking FDA's got enough resources to enforce. Right. Because generally the word out there is they need more money, and so I'm a little surprised that almost 50% of the respondents think that they've got the resources that they need, and this may be tongue-in-cheek wishful thinking. It's like, yeah, don't give them any more resources because we don't really want to see them every other week. So let's just leave status quo and have FDA show up once every 5 years, and we'll deal with that. So it's like, yeah, it's good enough. So maybe that there was a little bias in that, but certainly the FDA and many others think that they need more money to get this properly enforced. But as a rider to that, I think enforcement absent really good understanding on the FDA side and then inspectors who are doing the enforcing, unless they really, really, really understand FSMA well, then enforcement without training and knowledge is going to be a disaster for all of us. So I hope that that any resources that they do ultimately get are linked very carefully with really good training of the inspectors, as opposed to just hiring people and sending them out and saying, go check out those food safety plans. So with that, Jill, I'll pass it back to you.
Okay, great. And something I'll just sort of add on to this, and there was a comment section after this question, and it really aligned with how people felt as far as the positive impact. Or I should say even a higher percentage really did comment and said that the intent of FSMA is embraced, and how it's being carried out obviously has different views, but overall very high response from the comments that the intent is being very well embraced, within at least their own feelings or within their company. So with that was quite a bit of data from our initial results to dissect through. Thank you, David and Rolando, to go through that quickly. We do intend to put out more details around this survey and content out there in the coming weeks as fast as we can. We appreciate everyone who was able to participate in this survey. As an incentive in the survey, we did do a drawing for a tablet. So the winner will get notice about that. So again, thank you for everyone's participation. With FSMA Fridays, typically we have time for questions, although we've run a little bit short this time. A few questions have come in, so we'll go ahead and take those for next time. And again, everyone will get a link to this recording. And then just as sort of a follow-up on what we always do is that there was a lot of talk today in regards to the survey and the readiness and really leveraging resources, whether it's people or technologies to help in that preparedness. So, of course, I'm going to always plug the Acheson Group and their capabilities to help out, as well as utilizing technologies such as safety chains for program maintenance and ongoing improvement. And again, just in general, we love doing these sessions, continuing to bring dialogue and hopefully insights and information and answer your questions with FSMA Fridays. So we will build out our schedule now based on a lot of how these questions were answered. So we'll update our upcoming schedule here pretty quickly and provide much more of a folder for answering your questions in the coming sessions. So with that, I am going to go ahead and wrap up. I don't know if there's any parting comments, David or Rolando, that you want to share?
No, I think we learned a lot.
Yeah.
I'd like to say, I'd like to say, Jill, I think moving forward, we kind of know where to go. I think we know where some pain points are, and we'll continue to talk about environmental monitoring programs, supply chain, how foreign supply verification program, percentage control rule dovetails together. And moving forward, we'd love to hear from everybody who tunes into FSMA Friday. If you've got pain points, if you've got questions that you want us to focus on, let us know. Because, you know, we're here to provide useful information. I think that would be probably my final parting comment, Jill, is let's continue to hear from folk. It's great people responded, and we'll leverage what we got, but keep them coming.
Yeah, that's great. Perfect. Okay, well, thank you, and thank you again, both to David and Rolando, as always, providing insights. Very delighted that we're able to share this survey and everyone that joined us today, and the dialogue will continue next FSMA Fridays on March 25th. Look forward to having everyone on board. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you.